So with that, we're going to go ahead and move into the next segment of our program updates. Our first person up is Drew Rayburn. This year it seems to be the year of strategic plans. So CSU just launched a new plan, the Courageous Strategic Transformation. There's a copy on the back table. And by the way, the left table back there is a bunch of stuff from CNHP, including free books that you can take with you, wetland field guides, and a bunch of other things that we're sharing. And the right side is for partners to share their stuff. I forgot to say that in the beginning, but please put anything you wish to share with everybody in the room on those tables back there. New CSU strategic plan. It is meant to be a blueprint that's going to lead us through the unknown times in which we're living. NatureServe also has a brand new strategic plan that I think does a wonderful vision for bringing the network of heritage programs together. And so both of these are on the back table if you'd like to see. Some other partners, lots of other partners have new plans going too. Partners for Fish and Wildlife has a new plan out. The Gates Family Foundation is working on another plan for the next several years. And we are working on ours. So this is the season. So our speakers are going to talk about some of their plans and the things that they have moving along right now that affect all of us. And I'll invite Drew up to tell us his story from the Nature Conservancy. Thank you so much, Drew.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here. 2 years ago was the last public event I was attending before everything changed. So I want to start by mentioning TNC Colorado's new strategic plan, which Dave just referenced, in which we reframe and reprioritize our work around tackling climate change, while also increasing our emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and as well as the co-creation of conservation solutions with tribal nations and other indigenous communities. We're also focusing on organizational excellence, turning the lens on ourselves to ensure a sustainable and resilient organization in which all staff feel supported, valued, and respected. Some of you have probably already seen this slide. So one of my main projects right now is actually the rollout of TNC's Resilient and Connected Network Analysis, which is the result of a 10-year effort led by TNC scientists, which identifies climate resilient sites and connectivity corridors across the United States. And if protected or otherwise conserved, these sites and corridors should sustain biodiversity and ecosystem function into the future under a changing climate. So we believe that in Colorado, the RCN is a foundation for accelerating the pace and scale of climate resilient conservation. And we're incorporating this analysis into many areas of our conservation work, including prioritizing our own land protection and improved management efforts. Some of you may have attended recent RCN workshops I've been teaching. I'll be leading a similar workshop at Partners in the Outdoors Conference next month, and also at the Society for Ecological Restoration Conference here later in April. So if you want to talk more about climate resiliency and what all of these graphics mean, I'd love to talk to you about this in a little bit more detail. But essentially, it is a roadmap for climate resilient conservation, and it's very open to other data layers and priorities. So taking this as sort of a foundation, you can stack on all the different priorities and data layers you might have at local, regional, or state scales. And again, we're involved in this in a number of ways with many of you here in the room. So talking about collaborations, TNC and CNHP go way back, about as far back as you can go to the founding of CNHP here in Colorado. And at present, there's quite a range of things that we're working on together. And starts with just highlighting the RCN analysis I just talked about. We're involved in rolling that out in a number of ways. CNHP was also very involved in the conservation planning process for what is now, I think, the second most recent state park here in Colorado, Fisher's Peak State Park, which was a major undertaking and supported by, obviously, Trust for Public Land, CPW, the City of Trinidad, and others. And we're really thankful for that partnership. TNC is also supporting the rollout of Codex, the Colorado Data Explorer that Dave mentioned earlier, both internally for our own conservation efforts and as part of collaborative conservation planning efforts around the state. Similarly, we're also involved in supporting the integration of COMAP, the Colorado Ownership, Management, and Protection Dataset. for conservation planning purposes, such as estimating the current acreage of land that is protected here in the state, pursuant to some of these 30 by 30 conversations that are ongoing. Both of our organizations are also working with Keep It Colorado on the first statewide private land conservation plan, which is, again, a real privilege to be involved in that effort. CNHP staff also serve on the technical advisory team for our 7-county Metro Denver Regional Conservation Assessment. And that also involves Metro DNA and a consulting company, Biohabitats. Both TNC and CNHP also work with the State Natural and Working Lands Task Force regarding the climate mitigation potential of natural and working lands, public and private, here in the state. And then finally, both of our organizations are involved in a long-term restoration, prioritization, and assessment effort in the Gunnison Basin. And I'm sure there are many other things I could mention here that I meant to advance the slide. There's the photo of us working in the Gunnison Basin. Okay, so I'll wrap up by just noting that we have a number of potential future increasing for spatial and national naturalization. I'll talk about that again. Dialing in more climate resilient management frameworks for our own network of preserves here in Colorado. We have some new developments that I think will be pretty exciting. Maybe we can talk about that the next 2 years from now. Updating potentially the Colorado Biodiversity Scorecard, which is now more than 10 years old and overdue for an update, and we would love to partner on that. Thinking again about statewide conservation prioritization, thinking about the RCN, Codex, COMAP, and then our ongoing collaboration of site inventories and biological inventories, site surveys on our preserves and properties around the state. Okay, so I wanted to mention also that we're hiring a conservation ecologist right now to join our science and planning team. The position opened this week, and applications are being accepted till the end of the put copies of the job there. I'm also you about that here today. The position is TNC Careers. We also plan on conservation data management for us probably within a month or two, and then later this year a conservation geographer, again a new position for us, really increasing our capacity for spatial data analysis and visualization. So I'll close by saying it's great to be here today to share some of our highlights of our partnership with CNHP, and I look forward to hearing everyone else's updates and to reconnecting with you throughout the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Drew. I'll invite Linda Ladov up now for her update. Linda's with Keep It Colorado.
I'm gonna have to lower this. The next person is gonna have to raise it up. Hi, everybody. I introduced myself earlier, Linda Ladov with Keep It Colorado. Thanks so much for introducing me, Dave, and for having me here today. I don't have any slides, so we'll use Drew's slide. For those of you who might not be familiar with Keep It Colorado, we're a statewide nonprofit coalition of conservation organizations. You might have known us in our previous rendition of the Colorado Coalition of Land Trusts, and we relaunched as Keep It Colorado in 2019. We are a membership coalition, and our members include land trusts and public agencies such as open space agencies and city and county and state agencies, as well as conservation professionals and nonprofit partners. I'm really excited to say that CNHP is our most recent member. Hey, Mike. Of our coalition. So thanks again for inviting us and being a member of our organization. They've been a partner with us for a long time. So I'm going to talk really briefly about our statewide private lands conservation plan, which is one of our biggest priorities this year. And before I tell you about it, I'm just curious to see, with a quick raise of hands, what percentage of Colorado do you believe is made up of private lands? Would you say it's around 15%? 30%? I think most of you know the answer. 60%? 60%. Yeah, 60% of Colorado is privately owned lands. And this really represents a huge opportunity for the conservation community to focus on those lands for conserving those natural areas for the future. Now, land trusts have been doing that work for decades. Since 1965, land trusts and their partners have conserved over 3.3 million acres of lands across the state, protecting those farm and ranch lands, those native ecosystems, wildlife habitat. So that work has been done for decades and will continue to get done. But it hasn't been necessarily on a coordinated strategic, in a coordinated strategic way on a statewide scale. So that's the purpose of the statewide private lands conservation plan, is to create a coordinated strategy that brings in multiple stakeholders to develop the goals and the priorities for what lands should be conserved across Colorado within that private lands area. And we have two, sort of a dual lens focus underlying that plan. One is the lens of climate resilience. Conservation plays a really important role in climate resilience and mitigating the impacts of climate change on those lands, as well as helping communities adapt to and change. Does that mean I have 3 left? Okay, thank you. So creating climate resiliency across those lands, mitigating the impacts, but then also helping communities adapt to and prepare for those changes. The other dual lens is JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I was really happy to see Dean Hayes ask the question of who isn't in the room today. And that's a really important question for Keep It Colorado. We're trying to see whose voices have not been represented in conservation planning. So it's one of our goals to find out whose voices haven't been included in strategizing and prioritizing the future of conservation. What the plan is going to look like is we are collecting input from our community and from stakeholders across the state in these different communities to identify what those goals and priorities should be. What are those landscapes that need to be protected? And we're doing that in large part with the help of TNC and its Resilient and Connected Networks tool, and CNHP's Codex tool, as well as COMAP, and overlaying those to find out what those priority areas need to be, including identifying not just the number of acres that need to be conserved, but the quality and the type and the location of those habitats, especially those that are connecting those large landscape areas, and looking at those ecosystems on regional scales, but also on a statewide level. We also hope that the plan will be an educational opportunity to help people understand what the benefits and the values are of conservation economically, socially, and of course, ecologically. And we hope it'll be an opportunity to garner more partnerships and collaborations in the conservation space as well. Finally, we aim to have this plan integrate with and align with other statewide initiatives that have common goals with our plan in areas of agriculture and water, wildlife, and outdoor recreation. So, for example, the State Water Plan and the Wildlife Action Plan and the Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, we're hoping to align our plan with those through the lens, again, of private lands conservation. So we've done a lot of work in the development of this plan over the last year or so, and we have a lot left to do. But one of those is we've conducted some listening tours across the state and one-on-one interviews with various communities. We're having a statewide forum next week. We had trainings on the Codex and RCN tools, which was awesome. I think a few of you in the room here were in attendance, and we're developing the plan this summer with plans to publish it hopefully by the end of the year. And I invite anybody who's interested in getting involved in that work to please get in touch with me. I'll leave my business cards on the table back there, and you can also learn more about us on our website, which is just keepitco.org. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Linda. Next up is Dave Kloot with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm going to go ahead and put this slide up here for us. And also the terrible emergency we faced here has been solved. We have coffee again.
Good morning, everybody. Great to see you all again. Like many of you, I think the last big meeting I was at was this one 2 years ago. I remember elbow bumping Dave. So it's great to see you all again. I just wanted to provide some updates from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I'd first just point out that, I'm speaking as supervisor of our species conservation unit, and we deal primarily with conservation of terrestrial vertebrate species, non-game, T&E species, our natural areas program, our resource stewardship program. But of course, the agency is much larger than that. So there's many other things going on. I'm just going to give you a highlight of some big initiatives that we're working on right now. So there's been some exciting developments around habitat and our capacity to implement habitat programs recently. In the current Colorado legislative session, we had a bill moving forward for implementation of the Big Game Policy Report. Part of that is funding to develop a statewide habitat connectivity and conservation plan. That's much more than big game. That's addressing all species, all habitats statewide. So looking forward to development of that plan. Along with that was a request for additional staffing, including 4 additional habitat biologists, 3 regional land use specialists, and a grants coordinator. That did pass through the Joint Budget Committee and will now be moving on into the long bill. So we're very optimistic that given that progress, that's going to pass. Through our internal budget development request too, we have requested a habitat unit supervisor and operating funds for all of our habitat programs. So we look forward to final approval of that as well. So with all of those things, we're looking forward to the development of a new habitat unit within the CPW terrestrial section and full staffing and funding to go along with that. So that's a really great development, and it's going to allow us to, really implement many more habitat programs. Oftentimes when I look at the places where we're sort of lacking in implementation, it is habitat conservation and habitat restoration. So that's exciting that we're going to have additional capacity to do that, and look forward to partnering with many of you in this room on implementing those efforts. We've heard a lot about plans and various plans that are going on. We are looking at our state wildlife action plan right now. We have our current plan, which was completed in 2015 in cooperation with the Heritage Program and many other partners in this room. We're continuing to use that as the guiding document for our actions for threatened and endangered species, non-game species, sensitive species throughout the state. We're taking the perspective now of really looking at all of those plan elements as data themselves. We're all very good at using data, and we know we can manipulate data, we can sort, we can filter, we can create summary statistics. So rather than looking at that plan as a static, glossy, nice picture document that sits on the shelf and then we look at every once in a while, but creating tools that we can really dig into and look at that data and do all of those manipulations that we're used to doing with data. So to facilitate that, we're developing conservation dashboards. So starting with the database that was created with the SWAP, and looking at how we can improve the overall efficiency for accessing that data and looking at that data. Those are in development, and hopefully we'll be able to share those with you soon. We're also looking at the 2025 State Wildlife Action Plan. That will have to be done. So we'll probably be starting on that in the next year or so. Again, looking at input, looking for input and cooperation from many of you in the room to develop that plan. Again, trying to create and envision a more accessible, dynamic, and adaptable plan so we can use that in the future. Just wanted to give a brief update on Recovering America's Wildlife Act. For those of you that don't know or might need a reminder, this is federal legislation that would provide $1.3 billion annually at the national scale for implementation of state wildlife action plans that I just mentioned. For Colorado, that would mean an additional $26 million coming to Colorado Parks and Wildlife and then benefiting conservation programs throughout the state. 24 million of that would be for wildlife, and then an additional $2 million for conservation of rare plants. So that's really exciting. Just where that is in the legislative process, there are currently 266 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. It has gone through markup in the House Natural Resources Committee and passed out of that committee. So the next step is a floor vote. there. All in this, on the Senate side, the Senate version of the bill, there are 32 co-sponsors. It has had a hearing in Environment and Public Works Committee. It'll soon be going to markup there, and hopefully we'll pass out of that, and then to the floor vote. They're still working on some funding mechanisms and some offset issues that are of concern to some constituents, but the leading bill proponents are still very supportive and bipartisan support in both houses moving that forward. And the White House is in support of this and wants to see it pass this legislative session. So we're very optimistic and hopeful that that will move forward. I've got 1 minute left. So just a brief highlight of some other CPW work. It's been very, very busy. I think probably all of you have felt this. We sort of, there was a pandemic, but then, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of work going on in our community right now. So one of the big things that keeps us busy is wolf reintroduction and the implementation of Proposition 114. It takes a lot of time, a lot of stakeholder outreach with technical experts, with concerned citizens, with our Parks and Wildlife Commission. We're coordinating right now with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on development of a 10J rule to provide some regulatory assurances once wolves are reintroduced here. I'm sure many of you have heard there was a court decision just a week or so ago that relisted gray wolves in Colorado and throughout most of the western United States, or the lower 48, as an endangered species. To facilitate this, we're hiring some new staff. We have just brought on a new wolf researcher in our mammals research unit. Right now, we're in the process of hiring a wolf program manager in my unit, and then we'll also be hiring an additional game damage specialist. And we're looking towards our deadline of reintroduction of wolves into Colorado by December 31 of 2023. And let's see, I wanted to mention too, there's a lot of interest from the governor's office on wolverines, and I'm getting the 0 minutes mark left, so I'll wrap it up real quick. So wolverines are, on our radar as well. Lots of other new projects going on, again, through resource stewardship and the Natural Areas Program, and I know Matt and Raquel and Tina are going to be providing some other updates throughout the morning. So I'll stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dave. So much exciting stuff happening at CPW. We're going to go over now to our online speaker, Greg Duranlow with Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And Greg, are you? Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you all very well, and can you hear me as well?
We hear you and see you. Everything's working great. And to everyone online, I'm sorry, it sounds like there's been some sound problems. We're working on those here on our end. Go ahead and take it away, Greg. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I will try to be quick, but those who work with me know that I can be pretty verbose. So I wish I was there in person. The last time I was in that room there was for an orientation for my daughter, who has accepted an offer to attend CSU, so she will be a Ram in the fall. And despite me graduating from CU Boulder, I'll be able to say, go Rams. So I'm going to attempt to cover 2 years of mission change in under 10 minutes. Forgive me if I talk fast. Senate Bill 19181 brought with it a fundamental change to COGCC's regulatory program. Our mission changed from fostering the responsible development of oil and gas in a manner that protected public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, to regulating oil and gas operations to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. And this change from foster to regulate has broadly been called our mission change. From the time that Senate Bill 19181 was signed by Governor Polis in April 2019, the COGCC has been all hands on deck to implement the necessitated changes to our regulatory program. A full-time professional commission was seated in 2020 and took on the mission change rulemaking, which was a complete overhaul of our rules. The changes were adopted in November of 2020 and effective January 2021. And so 2021 was spent implementing the rules, writing guidance documents, internal standard operating procedures. We conducted numerous training sessions with operators. We learned new coordination with local governments and continued to provide direct oversight of the oil and gas operations through permit review, on-site inspections, forms review, and outreach. Looking ahead to 2022, We'll be updating guidance documents based on what we've learned. We'll be implementing the newly adopted financial assurance rules, which were adopted about a week ago, and assembling various working groups as directed by our commission. I'm going to walk through the rules, and in the interest of time, I'm going to really skip over some of the things that I had intended to say. But suffice it to say, the changes were really far-reaching throughout our whole series. Our planning and permitting process took on very significant changes, with all applications for surface development associated with oil and gas development now going through the commission for approval rather than through the director. Permitting the surface first through oil and gas development plans means that impact consideration is now required to be a leading factor in permitting rather than trailing the geology and wellbore engineering. And additionally, our rule changes added considerations for environmental justice and cumulative impacts, both formalized through the permitting process. Changes were also made to our procedural rules to accommodate a full-time commission, which was the first of its kind in the state, and to provide the public with better access to the hearing process. I'll skip over the sort of operational and underground injection control rule changes. We also made significant changes to improve environmental protection. Rules governing the handling and management of E&P waste, including changes to our spill reporting thresholds and requirements to obtain prior approval for facility closures. Additionally, we work closely with the Air Pollution Control Division at CDPHE to curtail venting and flaring of natural gas from upstream operations, including during drilling, well completions, well stimulation, and production operations. And then COGCC also worked closely with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to revise our wildlife protection rules, including adopting no surface occupancy areas and developing a program for compensatory mitigation as required by the Habitat Stewardship Act of 2007, which was amended by Senate Bill 19-181. So just to touch on some of the outcomes from the mission change rules and what COGCC has been doing in implementation for the past year. Staff and industry have been learning how to work through our new planning and permitting process. And so 2021 saw a significant dip in permits submitted and approved statewide, due both to this learning process and the economic downturn of 2020, which affected industry activity well into 2021. The 13 approved oil and gas development plans were approved by the commission following staff review, and they represented 20 new or significantly modified oil and gas locations and supported 195 wells. Of the oil and gas development plans, 4 had locations within 2,000 feet of one or more residences, 2 were within disproportionately impacted communities, and 2 had locations within high priority habitat. We're seeing a fairly strong rebound in planning and permitting activity now that folks have sort of got their feet wet and are figuring out the processes. And we've got a growing backlog of oil and gas development plans, Form 2As, and applications for permit to drill. And then hot off the press news, yesterday, the commission issued its first denial of an oil and gas development plan after careful consideration of the application and protections offered by the operator, staff analysis, public comment, and local government feedback. I mentioned the spill and reporting and facility closure requirements that were modified in the mission change. And this table just shows the number of spills that were reported during facility closure. Legacy well plugging and associated facility closure remain a very positive aspect of the current development programs, especially along the Front Range. And these 402 spills represent about 50% of the total spills reported statewide in 2021. Notable in this table are 195 spills documented at wellheads, and nearly all of these were found and reported during the cut and cap programs for plugging and abandonment of vertical wells in the Wattenberg field. In the past, these historic releases would probably have been cleaned up simply by excavating, disposing the soil, and replacing with imported clean backfill, but there was no documentation or verification. And now, as a result of the mission change rules, these incidents are being reported and cleanups documented and verified. And it represents a significant environmental benefit resulting from the rule change, though some would argue, hey, there's more spills being reported. But that documentation is definitely a positive. Likewise, we've seen a growth in total active remediation projects across the state, primarily resulting from that requirement for prior approval for facility closure, a 60% growth in the West and 160% growth on the east side of the state of active projects. And again, COGCC sees this as a positive development, as these sites will ultimately reach a documented cleanup and closure. And then finally, in the statement of basis and purpose for the mission change rules, the commission gave instructions to convene a number of working groups to grapple with the concepts and challenges that could not be addressed directly in the rulemaking process. One of these was the biological resources, and I had the pleasure of working with David on the biological resources working group, which sought to catalog sources of data for biological resources and make recommendations to improve COGCC's protection of biological resources. And the report is linked here and is posted on our website. And then other working groups that will be convening are listed as well. So that pretty much wraps it up for me. I will share this presentation so you can have my email address if anyone has any questions or wants further information on that. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you so much, Greg. It is really exciting what's happening at COGCC with the mission change. And thanks for your leadership on that. And if you want to share in the chat in Zoom the link to the brewing report, that would be awesome too.
I will do that.
Thank you. Well, it's now time for our first break. So I'll encourage everybody to get coffee and snacks and treats and enjoy talking with everybody. And let me see. Sorry, what? Yep. We're okay. Whoops. We're gonna come back to it in 10:25, and we'll get started with the Botany, Vegetation, Ecology presentations. So for those online, thank you very much. Just hang out with us a little bit and come back at 10:25, and we'll get the show started again. Thank you.